one of the entailments of the space metaphor that I haven't examined very much, or thought about very much until 2 minutes ago, is the presence of the ground in phenomenological experience of space. When I've spoken before about space, I've indicated that the space of experience, and hence the space that we draw metaphors from, is not the same as the space of theory, if you like, or the space of abstract conceptualization. It's not Cartesian or Newtonian space, it's not a non-Euclidean space, it's not Minkowski space, it's none of those kinds of spaces. Given that metaphors always draw from embodied experience, when you're using metaphors of space, it has to be the space of, well, the space that I'm experiencing now. And that's if you like, the key argument that I'm making in all these videos and the bits of writing that accompany them, to do with how we map epistemology onto experience, or vice versa. So as I say, I think one of the things I haven't considered is the presence of the ground in that space. When we talk about Newtonian space or Cartesian space, there is no ground, there's no necessity for it. It's an endless, seamless distribution of extension, of dimensioning, and that's all you need to know. And similarly with physical spaces, the space between the stars or relativistic space, all those kind of spaces, again, don't have the presence of the ground. It's only embodied experience as medium-sized objects, living on a medium-sized planet orbiting a class 3 star or whatever it is, that gives us this sense of the ground under our feet. But it is a really significant aspect of our experience. It is one of those sort of limiting cases. And I think ground does feature in some understandings of knowledge. So it might be entertaining just to have a think about how ground metaphors are structured within that overall epistemology of knowledge and expressions of knowledge, the processes of knowing. One of the ways I think it features is in this, as a kind of analogue to metaphors of light that I've spoken about before. Light is used extensively within knowledge, from little drawings of light bulbs going on over people's heads when knowledge is suddenly acquired, to images of illumination that you get in creativity theories, to perhaps the most extreme example, this concept of what you might call spiritual enlightenment, in which one experiences oneself and the rest of the world as a kind of totality, but that totality is seen as infinite visibility, infinite illumination. So nothing is hidden, there is no part of either oneself or the world, or the connections between oneself and the world that is hidden from view. So that illumination is total, and the enlightenment which comes with that illumination is also total. So I think we have this idea of light, but I think ground also has a kind of relationship to that. I mean, certainly Buddhist teachings, Vedic teachings, lots of more recent spiritual practices and spiritual writings have this concept of the ground of all being. The ground of all being. It's in those sort of understandings, ground is seen as the source of all that exists, that which precedes immanence, precedes emergence, precedes expression and knowing. So it's a kind of necessary condition and necessary potential for knowledge emergence. So I think in terms of using ground as a metaphor, it's I think it's a kind of agricultural use of the metaphor there, if you like, but also the sense of something coming out of darkness and into the light. So it's a sort of necessary, nurturing, rich darkness, ground in that sense. I think we also get underground metaphors in sort of quests for alternative arrangements of knowledge, alternative understanding of knowledge. I'm thinking here of terms like underground. Certainly when the term underground is used for distribution of occult knowledge or distribution of forbidden political knowledge or heretical knowledge, it's intended to convey a sense not only of darkness, which is certainly one of the features of being underground, but also of being in a place of sharing and conveyance and distribution, which is not of this illuminated world. It's somewhere different. Things go underground and appear in totally different places. Their movements are mysterious, and so on. So I think this idea of the underground, as it appears in those terms, is interesting. I think it also finds real fruition in Deleuze and Guattari and their notion of the rhizome, or the rhizomatic, which, as I understand it, and my understanding is not good here, I understand it's a kind of, when they came up with the idea of the rhizome, which is a kind of root system, understanding of knowledge, the kind of root system which spreads underground. It's their formulation of that as a metaphor is kind of in contradistinction to illumination and particularly tree metaphors of visible, shared, established knowledge, in which here in this illuminated space of shared knowledge there are trees of knowledge which obviously feature very widely in the literature, right from biblical writings through to and beyond, of course, the cultural enlightenment, social enlightenment that took place in the 18th century. Lots of trees of knowledge were being cited then. You still get trees of knowledge, of course, today. The Dewey Decimal System in libraries is a kind of tree of knowledge. And Deleuze and Guattari's construction or development of the rhizome, the metaphor, is not exactly an attack on that, although that could be part of it, but it's an alternative way of configuring knowledge which potentially destabilizes, allows us to look again, or think again, not look again, allows us to sense again the connections between knowledge and perhaps how knowledge relates to things like power, for example. And I think key within that is the idea that there's a potential for rhizomatic structures, underground roots and weeds and that which burrows under the ground, to interfere with the roots of those trees which appear above the ground. So again, I think what we have there is an understanding, or an extension, or unexpected use perhaps, of part of the entailment of this spatial schema of knowledge, that entailment being the one of the ground and that which is under the ground, and that particular entailment being exploited for a variety of purposes. In those cases, either as an alternative to light as a signifier for totalizing necessity in the ground of all being, or in the case of Deleuze and Guattari, and in the case of, and more vernacular terms, the case of the underground, as alternative knowledge structures and possibly destabilizing and reconstructions of knowledge in different terms.